Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm doing a quasi part two of sorts ish to the video I released yesterday around the media simulation, the essay, "The Systems Neatest Trick." And I want to do this video because I read a couple essays by some authors that I really like, Jamie Wheal and CJ Hopkins, who both talk about current events and evoke the spirit of the essay "The System's Neatest Trick" by Ted K. And yeah, so let's get into it. Jamie Wheal's essay is really great. It touches on the themes. Both Jamie and CJ's essay, CJ Hopkins, sort of talk about how the system and the tricks that it deploys and plays and the illusions and how it sort of covertly co-ops rebellious attitudes and impulses and herds people into being agents of serving the system's needs without directly citing this essay, but both touched on it. So I'm just going to pull up Jamie's great essay on his Substack, Hot Tamales and the New World Order. And he starts it off by, he's very satirical and witty and clever. I really enjoy Jamie Wheal's writing. And he kind of recaps and says, basically, there's a whole laundry list of conspiratorial grievances that have animated, shaped, and united people from both the left and the right. Whether it's like the Great Awakening is happening, the turning of the tides is coming from the Great Awakening, or oh my God, the New World Order, Klaus Schwab. They're going to put the New World Order into effect with the whole like green. World Economic Forum stuff and the surveillance state and climate hoaxes and lizard people that control our minds through 5G and all this kind of stuff. And he's basically critiquing the blind allegiance of the red-pilled truthers, arguing that their supposed enlightenment often leads them into new forms of delusion, like what I was citing in the video yesterday, right? You escape Plato's cave only to wind up in another cave. You break free of the matrix only to realize that you are a eventuality that has been taken account for and part of the system itself. Or as Jamie Wheal cites in his essay, citing the great Robert Anton Wilson, who I am a huge fan of, where Wilson calls this reality tunnels, self-contained, limited worldviews that are mistaken for ultimate truth. And with conspiracy theorists, and particularly the ones that he's targeting, well, targeting is a strong word, but highlighting due to the current events, he's talking about, you're basically swapping out one conspiracy for another, one narrative for the other. And so he goes on to talk about that, and it's really funny too. I like some of the things that he writes there, and I think I'll share some of it. And then he also kind of keys in and cites C.J. Hopkins in his essay about a world, the sort of the real conspiracies, the real mechanisms that are shaping and molding the world that the system relies on, and not all of these sort of grandiose, big, glamorous, seductive, sort of sexy, sort of cinematic narratives where we want like to fight Bowser in his castle, get to the big boss, or have some grand finale where we blow up the Death Star or something. It's like he illustrates how it's really just this kind of like global capitalist system that is AI driven, surveillance enforced, deregulated tech oligarchs like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and their networks, like the sort of Silicon Valley Burning Man elite, or like so funny because Burning Man was so not about that when it started. But obviously, just like anything, it becomes corrupted. And he basically suggests that, like, while these conspiracies are very like emotionally compelling, the actual dynamics of power are less personal and more systemic, perpetuated by the system and the inherent structures rather than an orchestrated, planned cabal of people, moving chess pieces around. And he challenges the conspiracy theorists who idolize Donald Trump and Elon Musk and RFK and as being saviors. I'm looking at you, Aubrey Marcus. I'll I have no problem. So I feel like Jamie Wheal is sort of like being like, hey, all you people, particularly people in our space, in the consciousness expanding spiritual psychedelic type of space, like the that kind of space, the conspirituality space, thinking that we've landed on some positive thing here. It's shallow, hollow, empty illusion. So yeah, let me share a little bit, and I could share a little bit from. Okay, so Jamie Wheal is saying basically like I'm going to give the extended QAnon MAGA MAHA conspirituality crew 100% benefit of the doubt. Let's say that we are in fact hurtling towards a sinister new world order, techno dystopian surveillance state where transnational oligarchs conspire to terrify, manipulate, and control us for their sinister aims, and we are robbed of our agency, our consciousness, and our civil liberties. Do you accept that general? If you do accept that general premise, and it informed your decision to cast your anti-regime vote against Kamala and for DJT, Elon, RFK, how do you think that's going to turn out? Because of all of you red-pilled truthers convinced that you've unplugged from the matrix and have been bravely following the white rabbit, doing your own research and preparing for the coming storm, I'd humbly submit that you haven't been red-pilled at all. Someone slipped you a hot tamale instead. And then he's talking about this candy here. So then he goes on to explain, Robert Anton Wilson's reality tunnels, and basically what that is like your whole reality is enclosed in a self-referential version of awareness that can be mistaken for the whole enchilada, as he says. For instance, your whole life you might have chased parental approval, good grades, a respectable job, a mortgage in the right zip code, and the correct cars in your driveway, aka the suburban success reality tunnel, only to have a midlife crisis or go to Burning Man or Peru with Aaron Rodgers and come back realizing none of that was real. I am worthy of love, and I don't need to live a life of compliant conformity. I'm going to start wearing mala beads, overpriced scoop neck t-shirts, and pajama crotch Aladdin pants while binging Sex at Dawn. Hey, Chris Ryan chat out there. I've seen through all the illusions, man, all of my past life, and I am now free and awakened. And then he says, not so fast, Bodhi fuckboy. Cool your jets, ratchet Shanti priestess. In all your exuberance and haste, you've most likely just swapped your boring beige reality tunnel for a new rainbow reality tunnel. It's got way cooler features and can feel like moving from 2D Pac-Man to AR Pokemon Go, but it's still a reality tunnel. This accounts for 99% of the Insta shamans online these days, and for 99% of the contrarian political analysis on X, YouTube, and Telegram. As soon as they got free from an old illusion, they get snookered by the next better one. This motif of forgetting our forgetting shows up in the most esoteric traditions like the Tibetan bardos, those between life and death realms that you traverse after you snuff it. Yeah, and so then he goes on to talk about C.J. Hopkins, and I'll probably get to that. His great essay, "A Tale of Two Psyops." Jamie Wheal says he outlines what I think is a crucial gut check for those who believe they've woken up and seen through the matrix. like the dream within a dream notion we just talked about. Hopkins here lays out the idea of a faked battle of a territory within a territory, of our culture wars and recent presidential election, the MAGA psyop. And so, yeah, look, I think that maybe I'll get back to this, but all of my wisdom has come from not all of it, but a lot of my wisdom has come from being disillusioned, particularly when I was in high school and 9/11 happened. And it was a very unifying moment. No one knew what the hell was going on. It was a big shock for a lot of Americans too, to find out, what the hell we've been doing in the world, years later, around sometime around 2000, 2003 or 4 or 5, something like that. To be like, wait a second, like what's going on here? And, being a kid from New York, my parents both teachers, Democrats, I just, during that time, you're like, yeah, these Republicans are evil, warmongering, lying, sniveling, terrible people. And rightfully so. Dick Cheney, George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, the Condoleezza Rice, the whole lot of them, totally. And then comes along Obama. And when I was in college, I was like, wow, this is the guy, this is where we're going to make change. And then graduating during the Great Recession, and then Occupy Wall Street and the bank bailouts and the NSA spying and Snowden and Manning and all that stuff, it was just like, oh yeah, this guy's just more of the same. It's the devil in a new dress, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, because that's all he is he's the salesman for the system. The system is going to find the best salesman that they can, and if they can't, they're going to do the best that they can to make sure that they still. And I keep personifying the system here. I'm sorry. It's just easier to talk about it that way, because I want to make clear that, like, it's not like the system thinks, and this, it's the system is what I explained in the video a bit, but I could take some more time basically to just shed a little bit of light of like what I keep talking about when I talk about the system. The system as a vast network of self-perpetuating, voluntary, spontaneous, interconnected structures that are on an autopilot drive, fueled by an incentive system backed by our perverse values of extraction and domination and greed and separation. It transcends nations, leaders, ideologies. It's essentially, in C.J. Hopkins' essay, A Tale of Two Psyops, he explains it as the global capitalist empire. Sorry, I was using also Catherine Austin Fitts, who is fantastic, the Solari Report. A couple shout out to some of the women in the space that I find just to be absolutely phenomenal in reporting about like the system. She calls the system Mr. Global. I believe she calls it Mr. Global. And CJ Hopkins here, I think, calls it Globo Cap. Globo. Why do I keep saying Globo? He doesn't call it Globo. It's not a dodgeball gym name. But yeah, Catherine Austin Fitts, Whitney Webb, Annie Jacobson, Naomi Wolf, all really, really good. Naomi Klein as well, too. Very good. But the system is not a group of individuals, as I don't think I got into that part in terms of what the system is not. Ted starts out his essay, The Systems Neatest Trick, by saying what the system is not. And so he basically talks about how the system is not, the bad apples. The bad apples are products of dealing with life living in and serving in the various sectors that they occupy within the system. And he gives the example of like when a cop is more brutal than necessary, uses police brutality. That is not a function of the system because the system wants to do things as efficiently as possible. That's a product of a human being serving the system and having their own human flaws as a part of that, right? In a way, the system could, if it was a better system, could encourage like healthy, good behavior and things like that. But the system doesn't give a fuck about anyone really. So naturally, what you get is a lot of chaos and disorder that is the result of the disease that is the system. Those are products of a diseased, toxic system. So the system is a network of economic, political, cultural, entertainment, educational, social mechanisms that operate to maintain and expand dominance. It's a cancer, essentially. The system is a cancer that just wants to spread, accumulate, assimilate, right? I talked about it as being the Borg from Star Trek. Its main goal is it's a hive mind, and it tries to acquire and assimilate everything that it comes into contact with, and if it can't assimilate it, then it destroys it. So it's supranational. It exists above and beyond any single nation, state, or government. Its leaders are basically just sort of stewards or administrators of the components of serving the system. It's invisible. It's not any particular territory. It's not a tangible, material thing. It operates through institutions, through markets, technology, through culture, entertainment, music. Its territory is not geographical, it's conceptual, it's structural, it's energetic. It evolves organically like a foreign alien organism. And it responds to challenges and threats by assimilating, subsuming, absorbing, neutralizing, or redirecting. And unlike traditional forms of totalitarianism that we've seen in the past that have been tied to governments or ideologies like fascism or communism or, anyism, really, the system is rooted in global capitalism. And capitalism in a distorted technocratic oligarchic sense. So relying upon the efficiencies and the production of technologies to keep extracting and doing all the things that all the worst parts of capitalism, essentially, because the system is so big that it can't be sustainable. It can't produce wellness and goodness. It's just too much of a Frankenstein's monster. So it got the way that the system functions the best is through information and data, biometric data, all kinds of data. Maybe data that I am literally feeding data into the system right now. I am feeding this data. I have a ton of data that I have fed into the system, and you have too. And maybe more so me, because I've been doing podcasts since 2014 and speaking publicly and openly about a lot of things. And, it's all out there. And because of technology and because of things like deep fakes and biometric data and, who knows where this goes with like gene editing and stuff. There could be a lot of ways to use that stuff to nefarious purposes if the system feels that it's being threatened and it needs to neutralize something. So it's more of a subtle, sophisticated version of coercion rather than overt force, right? Like one of the biggest things that I would wonder sometimes is like, why don't people see us, particularly, talking about like stepping out of an ideology only to, find yourself in another one. I mean, that happened to me so many times. I had become so frustrated. Like, why can't people see what I see? Don't they see the horror and the terror that is going on? I mean, and when I was in the libertarian camp and on the show Part of the Problem, I was very adamant about like, it's the wars. Like, if people could wake up to like what we're doing. But I mean, just look at what's been going on since, I mean, for like forever, but like in particular, look what's been going on since October 7th of last year. It's still going on, and people can see it, people can share about it, people can post it, people can protest, but none of that does anything. No average American is going to do, no average citizen around the world is going to be able to do anything to stop the system, because it is not just one actor. It is a whole host of actors that are interconnected, that all benefit and profit and are rewarded from following the natural incentive system that the system provides. The incentives, like, it makes sense to do this. If I do this, then I get that. If I do this and I get that, then this person will be happy and I'll be able to negotiate this and we'll be able to get a deal for that, and that'll be good for me and them. It's the natural incentive system, right? So C.J. Hopkins in his essay, A Tale of Two Psyops, talks about how basically, what I was alluding to in the Systems Neatest Trick, and how the system preserves itself and ensures internal stability by neutralizing dissent, either through suppression, co-optation, or redirection. He talks about like resistance movements, like populism, the kind of populism that Donald Trump used to take over the Republican Party. And Hopkins basically talks about like, well, the system is looking at this and they're saying, okay, like, who can we cast as the next one to sort of carry the torch? Who can be the one to corral and herd these people into what he calls harmless cul-de-sacs, such as the free speech Twitter psyop, where their energy is redirected towards symbolic battles that don't threaten the system's foundations, right? Like, people in the United States have been really heated. I mean, I probably started to notice this, I want to say somewhere around like 2013, when do you remember Milo Yiannopoulos kind of came to fame? I think he was blogging at Breitbart, but he was part of the whole Gamergate scandal thing. I really, and then that was, I think, around the time too that Jordan Peterson rose into prominence. It was right around this time where I feel like the new sort of like corralling, the bait and switch, the sort of look over here so you're not directing your energy and attention over there. I mean, that essentially is the has been the sophisticated sorcery of this day and age. Is like, let's, it's to preserve the system. All the players that are interested in keeping the game of the system going the way it is, right? They're winning at Monopoly. They're like, we don't want to change games. Everybody who's interested in preserving the system and following the system's guidelines to do so are incentivized to redirect people's energy. Don't come storming to the castle and trying to break down the king's gate, because then the system would be in trouble, right? The system would be in trouble if everybody who identifies as a right wing person and everyone who identifies as a left wing person all of a sudden came together and were like, wait a second, we're just getting fleeced and screwed by this crony corporate technocratic oligarch class of billionaires and wealthy elites. Wait a second, I don't have anything in common with Elon Musk, really. Like Elon Musk has more in common with Donald Trump than I have with Elon Musk, right? Like we don't share the same world as these people who are in the billionaire power elite class. So naturally, they all work together to keep their game going. And that's the natural incentive system. So anything that they could do to redirect energy away from the structures and the foundations of this thing that we've created and say, no, 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 it's the Jews, it's the immigrants, it's, these people, this is the problem, the woke mind virus. And, granted, there is, kind of somewhat of a problem with that, but it pales in comparison. The all the arguments about, gender and bathrooms and, all of these things, granted, should be discussed and we should talk about them, but they should not be getting anywhere near the amount of attention that they're getting, only for the fact that people are being redirected and corralled into harmless cul-de-sacs. Yeah, go set off your fireworks over here down the street and away from the real puppet master, the real man behind the curtain. Once people start realizing, oh, okay, then you would think that that's when the system would be in trouble, because there's more of us than there are of the people that occupy and perpetuate the system. But that's how it works, by dividing and conquering and perpetuating polarizing narratives, like I was just talking about, left versus right, wokeness versus cultural Marxism, keeping people emotionally charged, right? Like every election cycle is always about abortion and taxes and immigration. It's always the same thing. It's all the time, because these are the issues that get under people's skins. These are the issues that people get emotional about, and to keep us from uniting, they need to keep a fragmented population, a distracted population, a numbed population, an anesthetized population, a separated population, a lonely, isolated, stewing in your own pathology, ordering DoorDash and Amazon, never leaving your house, peering out the blinds, looking at the neighborhood you live in, going, oh, the woke mind virus is destroying this planet. Meanwhile, you're doing all the things that you're doing there. You're perpetuating the system by participating in it and hooking yourself into the enemies that it offers you to it's biting the hook, as Pema Chodron would say, biting the hook. The polarization obscures the system's true nature, and it allows for it to continue functioning unchallenged. Right? It's brilliant. It's really brilliant. It really is brilliant. It really is brilliant. It really is functioning quite well. The system absorbs resistance by turning it into a marketable piece of content, or rebranding it for new demographics. And in CJ Hopkins' essay, he highlights Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter as an example, and then he rebranded it as X, and it's all under the banner of he's saving free speech, which both distracted and pacified conservative populists while leaving the system structures intact. The same. Yeah, he gives the example of like releasing the Hunter Biden files and then closing it up as to not damage the system. Right? Like just give the people just enough. You give the people just enough so that they're not totally living in squalor and suffering and really feeling the boot on their neck, and this way they don't rise up. I think that is probably the system's neatest trick in this day and age is to keep people all in line by, constantly like making sure that the zoo animals are fed. But once the zoo animals recognize that we're all living in a zoo and we want out behind these bars and we want some real food, the food from our land, and we want to be in our natural habitat, well, then that's hopefully when we dismantle the system. But for now, we're all living in a big human factory farm zoo, in living mainly in like manufactured, compartmentalized, fragmented, chaotic lives, and we are allowed to use our time and effort and energy and resources in order to work to perpetuate the system through tax dollars, through energy, through GDP, et cetera. And we are allowed and permitted to enjoy our freedoms by using fiat currency, Federal Reserve notes to purchase things like, a can of beer or some potato chips or something like that. And we call it freedom. And when in reality, it's a factory farm, it's a zoo. And the zookeepers are keeping us fed so we don't revolt and tear down the zoo. And C.J. Hopkins goes into talking about the new normal Reich, which he coined during the COVID pandemic, and the shock and awe strategy, right? I mean, this is again nothing new here. I believe that was during the Bush years, that was the shock and awe, shock and awe. This big shock and awe event, and then the system is able to take leaps and bounds in evolution, where fear and crisis management were used to implement new forms of control and allegiance to the system. It's tell the people that they're being attacked, tell the people they should be afraid, tell the people that aren't afraid and that don't think that they're being attacked are delusional or crazy or wackos or conspiracy theorists, demonize, shame, ridicule, and laugh at those people, make those people the enemy, and then turn people on people, right? So the zoo animals are fighting each other while the owners, the zoo master, the cage master is fine, walks away and is totally fine. So the system functions through simulation, creating symbolic realities, making America great again. Free speech Twitter, it gives the illusion of autonomy and victory while leaving its core mechanisms untouched. It is a self-perpetuating, spontaneous, voluntary set of interconnected incentive energy streams. Follow the incentives, play the game, make the moves. The system evolves to protect itself. Leaders, corporations, opposition movements all serve as roles within the system, and individual actors, whether they're powerful like Musk or Trump or ordinary, are constrained by the system's parameters. So even like what I am talking about right now, what Hopkins is writing about, what Jamie Wheal is writing about, what are we to do? It's like, well, we see this, we know this, we're informing ourselves about this. Where does it go? Where does it go? What do we do with it, right? Other than being like, wow, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. It's time to start actually putting the ideas. It's like the Wizard of Oz getting to Oz, seeing the man behind the curtain, and then just kind of throwing the curtain back and being like, well, I'm still, Oz isn't really that bad. It's, I'll go back and live in the way it is. It's like, I think we have to try and do something about it. Waking up to seeing beyond the veil, seeing through the illusion, seeing the infinite labyrinth of traps and simulations and caves and reality tunnels. It does put a great burden on us, but like the Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times. We are living in most interesting times. And not getting caught up in the illusion of change. Like battles and victories within the system are often illusions that do not affect the underlying structure. As in the video I said yesterday, like what has really changed, right? Like the system enacts these sort of false, shallow changes, and they offer it up as these little breadcrumbs they throw to the peasants, little bread and circuses in the form of movements of reform and things like that, while we're getting lost in celebrating in the glory of all that. They're doubling down on their power and their control and making the system even stronger and more and harder to detect as well. And so Hopkins' essay suggests that the system is unstoppable, and it's not an error. It's not oh, these knuckleheads just don't know how to get anything done and they just mess everything up and there's just a bunch of idiots in Congress and stuff. It's not a conspiracy. It's an organic evolution of what he cites to be a global capitalist Reich, a new form of totalitarianism. And for individuals and groups, the challenge lies in us recognizing and resisting the system without being totally consumed and absorbed by it. But Hopkins is definitely like very, very skeptical, pretty pessimistic, and pretty dark about it. And I'll share a little bit from his essay here. So yeah, a tale of two psyops, and it's pretty great. There's a section here where he talks about the summer of fear. In the summer of 2016, the global capitalist empire noticed that a new form of they noticed that a new form of resistance to its domination of the entire planet had risen up, not in the former Soviet Union or the greater Middle East, but throughout the West, right in the very heart of the empire. And so the war on terror was suspended and the war on populism began. The war on populism raged for 4 years and culminated in the rollout of the new normal, officially known as the COVID pandemic. For over 2 years, from March 2020 to 2022, the global capitalist empire morphed into a new form of totalitarianism, a global capitalist form of totalitarianism, which was not like any other previous forms of totalitarianism. This period was the shock and awe phase of the rollout of the new normal Reich. The transition to the new normal Reich was broadcast through the global empire. The message was unmistakably clear. From now on, there will be a new normal. It will be like a permanent state of war, a permanent state of civil war. And so, from now, everyone would need to pledge their allegiance to the new normal Reich and follow orders or be labeled an extremist, a science denier, or a conspiracy theorist. Like really weaponizing, independent thinking and questioning. Then this is where he goes and he talks about what I mentioned with Elon Musk and Twitter, and how this whole psyop of basically like free speech, devil in a new dress, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right? Yada yada yada. So on cue, once the story of the Hunter Biden, the Biden files, he shut everything down so that it wouldn't do any damage to the global capitalist empire. So sorry, I just kind of skimmed over that. But this is what I wanted to get to. The America Made Great Again psyop. One of the most effective ways to neutralize an opponent is to let them win. One of the most effective ways to neutralize an opponent is to let them win. This is especially true when you're dealing with an opponent you can never entirely defeat. What you do is you lure your opponent into battle. You lure your opponent into a battle that you can afford to lose because you need to actually lose the battle and let your opponent actually win, i.e., not just trick them into thinking they have won because, well, your opponent isn't stupid. The battle that you lure your opponent into and let them win will be a battle over territory, a territory within a territory, but which your opponent believes is the territory. You can afford to lose control of this territory within a territory because you control the territory it exists within, and because your opponent doesn't know that. The trick is getting your opponent to believe that by winning this battle, they have won the war, and now they control the territory and have destroyed you or have otherwise removed you from power, when actually all that your opponent has destroyed or removed from power is a corporeal decoy, a material incarnation of an invisible, immaterial adversary, an adversary they do not know exists, or which they refuse to acknowledge the existence of, assuming, of course, that is what you are. So he's talking about, the territory that controls the territory is the system of global capitalism. Uh, that there's no more nation states anymore. It's all just one global capitalist empire. And so here he goes to say it here. There is no America to make great again. America is a simulation. It's a map of a territory that does not exist. It's a dream within a dream in a film that no one can see because everyone is watching. It's a brand name for an imaginary product. So both very good essays here. And I'll just say that, we'll talk about how he ends it here. He talks about, there you have it. It's a tale of two psyops. I'm sorry that isn't as comforting as a story about how Donald Trump and Elon Musk and their global capitalist investors and their subsidiaries, agents, and ass- assigns, assigns. That's weird. Are going to make America great again. If it's any consolation, one thing is certain: whatever happens, it won't be boring. Yeah. Well, that's definitely true. Um, uh, so let me go back to this actually, because he says something cool here. Where he says like, however, before he talks about like the Musk cult is growing, and its apostles are preaching the gospel of Elon throughout the empire, paving the road to the privatization of everything. Uh, it's the dawn of a new golden age of freedom, ruled by global corporations and beneficent oligarchs. However, before the golden age can begin, America must be made great again. And so the free speech Twitter psyop has to be repeated on the macro level. The same conservative populist resistance to the evolution of the global capitalist system that Musk corralled and neutralized needs to be corralled and neutralized everywhere, not just in America, everywhere, all throughout the West and the rest of the empire. Once it's corralled and neutralized and whipped up into a frenzy over wokeness, cultural Marxism, and communism, it can be unleashed on the remnants of the dying age of nation states, national sovereignty, constitutions, and so on, which will prompt the global powers that be to take extreme measures to defend democracy, which will prompt the other global powers that be to take more extreme measures to rescue the republic, which will prompt the global powers that be to take even more extreme measures to defend democracy from fascism. And okay, this time I do think you see where this is going. Or I don't know, maybe you don't. But I don't think that I can make it any simpler, and I don't see any way to stop it or fix it. It isn't an error, right? It is the organic evolution of a system, a supranational system evolving into a new totalitarian form. So, yeah, what is his CJ Hopkins Substack? Yeah, good, very good. And so yeah, it's I think that the way like we part of the way forward out of the system is to divest and pull resources out of it, right? I believe it's not, maybe it's Derek Jensen or Stephen Jenkinson. I can't remember. One of them makes the point that like in order to defeat Hitler, talking about the actual Hitler, he's not making a comparison to Donald Trump. That's ridiculous. Um, he's he's like when people were trying to defeat Hitler during World War II, they didn't relegate themselves to like only using water sparingly or recycling or these kinds of things. He's like, look, we're facing a global crisis. The planet is literally like we're not doing such a good job of taking care of ourselves. And we're not really doing such a good job of taking care of all the beings that inhabit this planet. We are diseased. We're disconnected. We're chaotic. We're basically like a bunch of grasshoppers that have mutated into locusts, and we're swarming. And he's like, so you're not going to solve that problem by like switching the toothpaste that you use or something like that. Or actually, maybe you will if you're using fluoride toothpaste, but there is a way, I guess, in a sense, to try and I mean, really, it's being okay with not participating in the grand spectacle of the culture and society that we're a part of, not biting the hook, not having expectations or believing or putting hope in regimes or cabinets or presidents or founders or anything really outside of yourself and your direct, tangible environment, the people that you care about, the people that you love. Like no one, I mean, it sounds a little cheesy or cliche to say, but it is true. And I think a lot of times these things do sound cheesy and cliche to say, that are true because we kind of want something like more exciting or we want like something maybe more complicated, but no one can control can fully control your mind if you're not giving them your mind to control. As long as you maintain presence and come back to yourself, come into your soul and root down and grow down and mature and ripen and start to consume less and start to give your power away by thinking that you need to be like, X, Y, or Z or whoever, or dress a certain way or act a certain way or say certain things or, buy certain things so that you have something to show people when they come to your home and say, oh yeah, look, we just got the new X22 washing machine and it's got all this blah, blah, blah. The culture of consumerism, I think, is maybe not necessarily a way to defeat the system, but definitely a way to sort of start to separate from the system and connect back to yourself and find the others, find your tribe, find people, and start to kind of build and vision. And I do have somewhat of I have some things to say around this because I do believe that I watched the movie the Kingdom of Heaven the other day. It was great, and he has this saying above his workshop that says, "What is a man who doesn't try to make the world a better place?" I do sort of believe that, like, there of really rooting down and being a part of where you are and having some stake in the game, some skin in the game, some care about your place and your people, to make that place better, but not fully detaching from also participating in the world in a way of like inviting other people to come and experience a different way of living. And I think that that is something that is really totally lost on a lot of people that are really caught in the vice grip of the system, is that they don't even know that there could be potentially alternative ways to exist. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they want. They just maybe are marching to the beat of somebody else's drum since they've been born, doing what they think that they should do, how they think they should live. And, I do think that mind expanding, heart opening, soul opening experiences that can be provided by having a psychedelic experience can be beneficial in order to see through all of the things that you've taken for granted and accepted as baseline reality to try and envision other kinds of realities. I think that we can organize ourselves in different ways. It has to be smaller. It has to be it has to be smaller. It has to be, decentralized. You can't have you can't have a country of 330 million diverse people of diverse ethnic backgrounds and cultures and religions and beliefs and try and shoehorn everyone into the same box. It's not sustainable. It's insane. So yeah, a way to get back to sanity is to find other people that just don't feel good with the way things are. Some people have really internalized the state of not feeling good, and it has become normal, or it has become, well, that's just what life is. That is one version of life, one sliver of life. The system will probably eat itself because that's what it does, right? Like a cancer, it will eventually just consume the host. Uh, and we could probably create little pockets to exist temporarily outside of it, right? I think like some kind of bifurcated society, like something in Brave New World, where the savages don't participate necessarily in the dominant society, and they're seen as like a tourist destination. Um, it is possible if the people that don't want to participate in the system eventually wind up, siphoning off and creating little decentralized, localized pockets of communities and just forming new towns and new cities. I think that we oftentimes in America, especially, take for granted the fact that, well, the cities that we have and the borders and the boundaries and the lands and the counties and the states we're all just always that way, and at least it seems very steady in our lifetime. Like people routinely mock the idea of like Texas seceding or California seceding or something like that. But I, I I do think that that is really we live in such an omnipotent, omnipresent, all-consuming system of interconnected incentive structures that it really is like being inside a fish tank, inside an aquarium at the bottom of the ocean. And it's not impossible to get out, particularly if you know all of that. If you know that you're a fish swimming inside of a fish tank inside of an aquarium at the bottom of the ocean, it's quite possible to maybe find your escape to another part of the ocean. But yeah, I mean the little things that we could do, like there are little things that we could do. It doesn't mean that we're going to dismantle the system. It doesn't mean we're going to stop the, wars. It doesn't mean we're going to, totally, shift and have this like revolutionary change in one fell swoop. But then again, you never know, right? Like nobody predicted that the Soviet Union was going to fall when it did. And a lot of people like Thaddeus Russell and some others have said it was rock and roll, MTV, and blue jeans that did it, because people were like, enough of this. We don't want to live like this anymore. A lot of the youth were like, screw this. Like I go to Germany, I go to West Germany to and or East Germany and rave. And I have friends there. So why do I care about your stupid wall and your rules and stuff like that, right? And I think that maybe, a lot of people who are young today are kind of frustrated and upset with the way things are. So, every so often there are changes that happen, and some of the little changes that we can make and we can spread it is like deciding on where you bank and where you shop and what kind of products you buy and who owns the products that you buy, right? Because it's like, okay, I bought a shampoo by some brand, I don't know, fancy brand, and fancy brand is owned by Procter and Gamble. Okay, well, who owns Procter and Gamble? Oh, okay, a bunch of like investors and a board and people, and they all have subsidiary companies. Okay, who owns those companies or who has interest in them? And then you trace it all the way back and you realize that basically all the companies, most like 99% of all of the companies that are making products in the grocery stores and in the supermarkets and clothing and all kinds of other stuff are all owned by basically three companies: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. You just look at like look at the biggest companies and then see who are their investors. Where do they share investors? Where do they share relationships? Where do they share networks? Those are the top level of like system operators who are functioning within the system. And there's a lot like people who are built a certain way, right, are attracted to what the system has to offer. But why should the rest of us who don't particularly enjoy living in this system be forced to live in it? Well, because obviously that's how they are able to be at the top. There's only a top when there's a bottom, right? Like you have to, it has to be that way. And again, it's not like most of these people aren't consciously like, yeah, I work for BlackRock. I'm screwing people over and I feel good about it. Like maybe some of them, like honestly, maybe some of them. Like I think there are people that really get off on screwing over other people or subjugating other people. I mean, just look at history, right? It's pretty apparent. But as Frank Herbert said, power attracts the corruptible. It's not that absolute power or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's that power attracts the corruptible, the people who are willing to do the deeds of serving the system and are willing to live that way, right? In a lot of ways, right? Like I talked about how, like we live in like a human factory farm, or we live in a zoo or an aquarium. Well, there's always somebody who's managing it, right? So even these people aren't free. These heads of these multinational corporations, companies, and governments, we're all in prison, but they're still the prison guards and the warden. So we're really all in prison. And when you think about it, I mean, when you really want to get deeper about it and realize that we're all connected and everything is one and we're all subjective consciousness experiencing itself in a form of an infinite, eternal game that always continues, and there's no such thing as death. And, we're finding out about ourselves, the one, the all, through various different ways. And this is the current state of the game. And as soon as enough people realize that, like, well, I shouldn't say it like that because it's not like as soon as enough people realize, but at the end of the day, at the end of the Big Bang, at the beginning of time of all things, from the beginning there was nothing and there was only the word. Like what I'm saying is we're all doing this to each other. We're all doing it to ourselves. As soon as there's ways that we could figure out how to exist with less suffering, there will be a more enjoyable experience of living in this reality for more people. And I think any noble leader, first of all, probably doesn't seek power. You know, just like in Dune when he's like, "Oh, he's not the Mahdi. The Mahdi would never actually admit that he's the Mahdi. He would pretend to be humble. That's so, so it must be him." But seriously, like we should anybody who seeks power is sus. Okay, we should grant power over our affairs only to those who are reluctant to hold it, and then only under certain conditions. You know, it's we definitely are, as Terence McKenna said, led by the least among us, and we also are we sort of allow that to happen. You know, we're all participating in this. I'm participating in it, and you're participating in it. And I have to say that there's a reason why, I'm not, out, fighting in some fucking grand resistance type of way, because it's not really that bad, right? Like we don't really feel the boot on our neck, as much as this system of control is very sophisticated, it's very smart, and also it's not real freedom. It's not real, raw, true freedom, and we're not living up to our highest capacities. So, a noble effort would be to have leaders who ask people to rise up to their highest good and create the most noble kingdom that we can that serves the most amount of people. The most noble kingdom, the best kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, if you will, is a kingdom, an empire, call it whatever you want to call it, not in the traditional sense. What I mean by it is in the sense of like the kingdom of heaven, like the the world that enriches, empowers, instructs, and facilitates the best out of people. And its number one aim is to truly cause the least amount of suffering, the least amount of impact, and use the resources that are necessary in order to function and live in the happiest and most peaceful way. I'm not going to stop talking about this and thinking about it and doing my part to try and get there, because right now it's a dream, it's a vision in my mind. I've had many experiences and I've had many thoughts and visions where I see a place like that. As Charles Eisenstein calls it, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Our hearts know that there is a more beautiful world possible. Deep down, people are good. And most people that we deem to be not good are acting in self-interested means in because of the system that we all function in. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to wake up out of the system and wake up out of the next system and the next system and the next system and the next system within the system, the simulation within the simulation, until finally you get to the end and realize that it's all happening according to a time and to a wisdom that we don't fully understand or know. And if we play the part of our the truth of our hearts and of our souls, that everything will unfold in the way that it's supposed to for us. And if suffering is in your dharma, then it's there, and we all experience it. And there's no there is no hierarchy necessarily to it. It's relative suffering. I bet that there's some billionaire right now who is suffering tremendously, maybe contemplating suicide. And you would think, well, what do they have to suffer about, right? But again, they're participating in a system that keeps the masses in prison, siphoning and extracting and occupying and oppressing, well, that takes a toll. They're still the prison guards, they're still the warden. We're still all in prison. And some might say that there is a shift. If you pay attention to human design, I really like it. I think it's neat. I like the fact that I'm an individual in human design, a manifesting generator. Jessa Reed and Mark Pontius talk about this on their show, The Projector and the Flail, and they talk about is it the order the order of the I want to say the order of the sleeping phoenix, but I think it's like the age of the sleeping phoenix, which is emerging in a new age of nonconformity, individuality, people thinking for themselves, people becoming more self-reliant, and not in this like individual raise yourself up by your bootstraps type of way, but in a truly empowered way where we all respect each other's differences and we get along and we seek individuality and we don't gravitate towards homogenizing and conforming to dominant systems that are run on fear, but instead operate on smaller, more local, individualized systems built of love and care and respect and reciprocity and true diversity. So yeah, they're interesting. Jess is interesting, and I'd like to have her on the show. Hopefully, I'll get to talk to her soon, and we could talk more about what the next age of the sleeping phoenix that is emerging out of, I don't know, 1,000-year human design cycle or something. Interesting stuff. Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. And until next time, I don't have a catchphrase to end episodes with, but I'll just say catchphrase. Make sure to subscribe. Thank you.